Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joe Emilio Show. I'm your host, Joe Emilio, and in this short episode, I'm going to talk to Ian Cameron from Action Society South Africa, who's going to give us an update on the DNA backlog. Now, a lot of you will know that I've been following this story since last year already, talking about the DNA backlog, and it has only gotten worse from 172,000 DNA cases or samples that were backlogged. It grew to 200,000 in early of this year. And now Ian Cameron is going to give us a little bit more detail on what is going on. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, please go check out Action Society SA. Their links to their social media and website are in the description below. Can you tell us first, what is Action Society, who are they, and what exactly you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So Action Society, in short, is an organization that positioned itself as a civil rights organization in South Africa, specifically focusing on the crime space and even more so, or in more detail, the whole gender-based violence issue, the DNA backlog currently in South Africa with regards to police forensic services. So I think in one sentence, civil rights organization that works with community safety and social justice in terms of gender-based violence.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been following you guys for a while since you started, and you guys have done some amazing work already. You've made quite a noise when it comes to the DNA backlog. Can you give us any updates on that?
So the last reasonably accurate figure that we have is that it's about 300,000 cases backlog now, and that's already two months ago, if not a little bit more. To give you context on this, one needs to understand that per case or per docket at the forensic science lab, you've got about an average of 4 pieces of evidence, or rather samples, that need to be processed. So you're talking about around 1.2 million pieces of evidence that we're facing in the backlog. Um, to give you even more context, in South African terms, we've got obviously many thousands of rapes per year in South Africa, and only 1 in 9 is reported. So just in terms of a gender-based violence and a rape point of view, it is incredibly worrying that it is not receiving the attention that it should receive.
Why do you think that is? Why? I mean, we hear Bheki Cele saying that, oh, we're gonna address it, we're gonna address it. You hear, which really irks me when Cyril goes on national television and says we're fighting a second pandemic, which is GBV, and yet here we sit with this backlog just increasing.
Yes. I yeah. My gut feeling is that that there's no political will to sort it out. I don't think Bheki Cele cares, to be honest. I don't think Cyril Ramaphosa cares either, because this is quite a simple thing. When you look at the Convicted Offender Amendment Bill, they've had more than enough time to implement it. Now, that's a different story, but I think it links very well to the DNA backlog, and they've had more than enough time to implement it, sign it, and put it into practice, but they haven't done it. Someone like Bheki Cele keeps himself busy with arresting people for going to the beach during lockdown, that type of thing, instead of focusing on how we can catch real perpetrators.
Yeah.
To take it a bit further in terms of political will, they have released, just in the last 4 years, they have released about 97,000 Schedule 8 offenders. So they include murderers, rapists, etc., without taking buccal samples. That means that almost 100,000 offenders are out on the streets again with no reference available, or no sample available should they commit the same offense to link them to other crimes. That in a country with 116 rapes per day. And those are only the ones that we know of. So imagine what it does to your psyche if you know that if something like that were to happen to you, the chances of you getting justice is incredibly small. Sexual violence and if I'm not mistaken, sexual assault cases have less than a 5% successful conviction rate. And those are only the cases that actually make it to court.
Mm.
We know of several cases where specifically women go to police stations and they want to report something like gender based violence, and whether it would have included rape or assault or both, etc. They get told by police, you need to go home and you need to go sort out the issue with your husband or your partner or whatever. And the majority of these cases, the victim knows about the or knows who the offender is. So it's astounding that they still don't get the attention that they deserve.
I saw once, speaking about this bill, I saw Bheki Cele say once that one of the reasons why they haven't signed it yet is because they're working on some kind of idea, for lack of a better word, where they want every single South African to give their DNA to, or a DNA sample to the database. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a very Cele-esque kind of comment. Cele is not known to be the most, or the rather the most competent, not only police commissioner in those days, but also minister of police or even politician. He is definitely not the right man for the job, but it simply doesn't make sense. Why would you delay justice? I mean, that could be a project on another level if they really want to look into that. We can talk about it. Let's see what happens. But the point is, they are now delaying and basically denying justice to thousands of people in South Africa, and it just basically means that so many more offenders will walk free and they can actually do whatever they want. And if someone gets raped, a lot of these victims need to kind of make peace with the fact that nothing is going to happen to the offender, and they would most likely have to face the offender again in the near future.
Cameron, something that's concerning me a little bit is, we have a DNA backlog of now over 300,000 samples and cases, which is just unbelievable. My concern is when you start taking the samples of the criminals as well, that might affect or add on to the backlog. Would that happen? Not that I think this CO bill mustn't happen. I am all for it, and I think it still should happen. I'm just a little bit concerned with how this is going to be implemented.
Okay, so I think it's very important that both the CO bill and obviously the DNA backlog in the police, or specifically the forensic center, gets sorted out. The CO bill needs to be passed, and it could possibly create a bit more of an administration issue. But should the right people and the right action be taken to implement it, there shouldn't necessarily be a further backlog. So I think it's very important that we continue with the process and that we keep government accountable.
So my final question to you is, how can we fix this? How can society, how can anyone really, I mean, because again, these politicians have been talking about this now for close to, or no, over a year. This has been an issue, this DNA backlog and all this stuff. The CO bill has been, like you said, 4 years now in waiting. What can we do, Ian? What can we do to fast track this process, to get the people's voices heard, the victims, help them get justice? What can we do?
I think some of the major things we can look at. Firstly, obviously, I want to ask people to support Action Society and support the legal fund, the justice fund that we've launched now for the court case against the South African government to make sure that the bill is implemented. So we've started the process for that. So I want to ask people to visit our website and donate. Then on top of that, I think it's important that people tell the stories of victims that have been denied justice or have had justice delayed. It's important that we don't see any of the victims just as statistics, and that we understand that it's an entire livelihood of even one or more people that is destroyed by these horrible things that happen. And if we implement a bill like this, it doesn't necessarily stop everything, but if done properly, it can actually be a preventative measure to make sure that offenders don't easily commit the same thing because they know they can be linked to whatever other offense they've been committed, and that they can get into serious or have serious repercussions for it. I think people need to support organizations like DNA for Africa, Action Society, and they need to obviously tell the stories of victims. It's important that we don't allow victims just to become statistics. We need to make sure that every victim story is told, and that we need to understand that in every case, it's not necessarily only one livelihood that is destroyed, but very often quite a few many more. So it's important that the public tells these stories, that they share these stories, and that they keep on pressuring the government to sign the bill, and that they support the organizations that are pushing for it on their behalf.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ian Cameron, so much for joining me today and just for this brief discussion. I will hopefully have you on a live stream and we can really get into the detail about all this stuff, and I would very much like that to happen. So I'll keep everyone updated when we have time for that. Ian Cameron, anything else you want to say before we end the show?
No, that's it. Thank you for the opportunity. I think this is the way that we need to share the word, and then tell people that we need to keep government accountable.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Over 300,000 DNA samples are backlogged. It's just getting worse. And anyone who thinks that Bheki Cele or Cyril Ramaphosa cares about the South African people, you are only fooling yourselves. And again, the deafening silence by most South Africans is just... It's indescribable at this point. There are thousands and millions of South Africans right now that are not getting justice. And this is no one else's fault but the ANC. If you've been following the story, you'll know why. So I've linked the previous videos where I talk about this story in the description below. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.